Hi, I'm Teddy Burris. I'm a LinkedIn strategist, trainer, and coach. And in my business, I have to look for opportunities to get into the right conversations on a regular basis. One way to get into these conversations could be cold calling. Now, I don't do a lot of cold calling any longer, but I've done my fair share, and I want to share with you a few tips that you might find useful as you're cold calling to move your business forward. Again, I'm a LinkedIn strategist. I've been practicing cold calling since 2005 when I took my first sales job. I've been practicing social networking since 2007. That's when I sort of moved away from cold calling. I teach LinkedIn as a business tool pretty regularly, and I experiment with LinkedIn regularly so I can help others learn how to use this tool. I'm on the internet. Just Google TL Burris, RRSS. So what's the purpose for cold calling? Most times people say it's to sell. It's not the purpose for cold calling. Cold calling is the process of making phone calls, sending emails, sending social messages, or knocking on the door of a prospect or a potential prospect with the intent of making a connection that can lead to conversations that can lead to business opportunities. That's what cold calling is for. Cold calling is not for selling. Cold calling is a part of the process of sales, but the sales part happens after you verify this is the right person and they verify that they want to talk with you about what you have to offer. Cold calling is to make a connection, to get into a conversation. So I got some rules I'm going to share with you that can help you get more value out of cold calling. First of all, before you start your calls, have your list ready and in front of you. Don't waste time during this calling campaign or this calling activity having to root through messages and your CRM and your spreadsheets and LinkedIn to pull together people you want to call. Put a list in front of you. The name, the company, the title, their LinkedIn profile URL, their website, their phone number, their email address, how you know them. Put all that information in front of you so that you can quickly figure out, what am I doing with this next lead? What am I doing with this next lead? It's really, and also, when you're making these calls, focus on a particular type of industry or similar businesses, so that you're using the same terminology over and over again, so you don't have to switch from terminologies for law firm, then terminology for laundromats, and then terminologies for government companies. Focus on one industry at a time. So that way it keeps your mind focused on the right words and terminology. Number 9, set aside at least 1 hour. At least 1 hour. You got to get into the groove. You got to get the move going. What's the word? You got to get your mojo in gear and get that flow happening. You can't do that in 30 minutes. You can't do that in 15 minutes. You'd be better off to set aside 2 hours and be very purposeful, get going. If you do a 2-hour stint, make sure you're pausing for 5 or 10 minutes in the middle. And you go off and you do something else and you just get a little distracted for a few minutes, then you come back. It's going to take a little time for you to get back into your mojo, but you're going to be much more successful with blocks of time when you're cold calling. And by the way, turn all this stuff off. Turn off your Google alerts, turn off your calendar alerts, your email alerts, or turn off all that stuff, social media alerts, so nothing is distracting you. You stay focused on the task at hand, which is making meaningful phone calls. Number 8, research. You want to know why you're calling this person, but you also want to know who they are. Where did they last work? What is their company all about? What is their role in the company? How long have they been there? Who do you know that knows them? Maybe what school they went to. You want to know as much as you can about this person and their company and their goal and their needs before you make that phone call. Because the more aware you are of them, the easier that conversation is going to be. You need to do your research for each individual person you're calling. Number 7, Apply the Dale Carnegie principles to your activities. Apply the Dale Carnegie principles to your calls, to your scripts, to your messaging, to your conversation, to your engagement. And here's what the first 9 principles are important. Number 1, never criticize, condemn, or complain. If you're trying to beat out the other guy, don't talk bad about the other guy. That won't work. It will not work. Number 2, honest, sincere appreciation. They're spending time with you. Be grateful for that. Be grateful for anything that's relevant to the conversation. Number 3, arousing the other person an eager want. Get them to be willing to peel back layers and speak and share and ask questions so you can learn. Become generally interested in that person. Sometimes I refer to this as active listening. Listen to them clearly. If you're having a Zoom call, speak to the camera. Don't speak to them down here. Talk to the camera. So you're speaking to them through the dot. Smile. Smile goes a long way. On a telephone call, in person, through Zoom calls, team calls, always have a smile on your face. Never, scowl or look unhappy or disappointed. That won't help you. Always be smiling. Number 6, remember to that person their name is the sweetest sound in any language or font. So use their name when you're talking to them. Number 7, be a good listener and encourage others to talk about themselves. The more you get that prospect, the more you get that other person on the other side of the call to talk about them, the more they're going to appreciate you because you became an active listener. Talk in terms of their interest. Make it all about them. Make it as relevant to them as you can. You'll get much more value from it. And number 9, make the other person feel important and do this sincerely. You apply these principles to your actions, your words, your engagement, your messaging, to your style, to your tone when you're cold calling, and you'll be far more successful. Here's rule number 6. Practice all of the steps. Practice saying hello. Practice bonding and rapport questions. Asking them about them, asking them about their weekend, etc. Practice your purpose for the call statement. This is why I'm calling you today. Practice your initial question. Here's the question that I have for you that I hope you can answer. Practice your call to action request, which might be the move forward step, might be the shut it down step. Practice using the pause to get the other person to reply. And practice listening. The more you practice cold calling, the more you get better at it. Practice makes permanent, not perfect. But you will have a style that if you practice it enough that you never waver from because you know it works. Rule number 5. Practice better and different voicemail messages. So often you call people, 60, 70, 80% of the time, you're going to get voicemail. So are you going to leave a voicemail? If you are, you want to script out what that message is going to say so that you're clear, concise, compelling, and you're interesting so that you create intrigue or interest for them to call you back. And remember the Dale Carnegie principles. Apply those to that voicemail message that might only be 30 seconds long at the most. And you might want to have 3 or 4 different scripts in case you're calling them a second time or a third time. The more you practice leaving voicemails, the better you will get at leaving voicemails that are meaningful and get responded to. Number 4, learn to accept rejection. It's a numbers game. It takes a bunch of calls to get to that one person who is interested in what you can do for them and willing to get in a conversation. You're going to have lots of people say no. You have lots of people who never call you back. You have lots of people who tell you to never call again. Don't take it personally. It's a part of the process. I often say, I want you to tell me up front no, rather than string me along for 2 or 3 or 4 phone calls. Just go ahead and tell me no now so I can move on to the next person. Number 3, make calls at different times of the day. You don't need to call the same time of day, Wednesday at 11 o'clock. Call early in the morning, but never call on a Friday afternoon. I've discovered for me that the best time for me to call C-level or early in the morning, better than any other time of day. Now I answer the phone. There's no reason you can't call someone at 7:30. There's no law that says you can't call at 7:30 in the morning. You might get a voicemail. That's fine. Calling someone at 7:30 in the morning, leaving a voicemail, inviting them to a conversation, they're going to look at you a little different than that person that calls at noon every Wednesday. Number 2, don't read the script. Rather have your flow chart of discussion points. No, have your flow chart of discussion points in front of you and know how you want to flow with the conversation. Know what you want to say or how you want to respond if they drop an objection or they ask a question or they say something you didn't expect. Pause for a moment and think about it. Somebody said, you want to be an actor here and you use your script to act. I say, be human, don't be a robot. Cold calling tip, study other cold calling tactics. There's lots of content, articles, videos, blogs, podcasts out there on this topic. Read different perspectives and philosophies and be willing to experiment with a few. Follow smart people who teach cold calling skills and tactics and listen to what they have to share. Experiment with adjustments to what you learn, and maybe you'll find a way to tweak it to where it works better for you. Do you want to discover other ideas that people have that can work and then try to find ways to adopt them to your processes? Here's a bonus. Show gratitude. Always be appreciative of their time, even when they say no, or you have to leave a voicemail. Even if the answer is no today, you never know what's going to happen later. They may have a need for you later. They may go to another company later and have a need for you. Show gratitude. Don't try to sell during a cold call. It's not the purpose of the cold call. The cold call is to find the right people who are relevant, qualified prospects, and move them into a business conversation. The purpose of the first cold call is to discover if they're the right person and move them into a deeper conversation. Don't sell during cold calls. Don't show up desperate. Don't make cold calls when you're desperate. It shows in your words. It shows in the way you engage. It shows in your facial expressions. Be more purposeful in your sales tactics to keep moving your ball forward or moving your pipeline up so that you don't go, oh my God, it's the end of the quarter. I got to make a bunch of cold calls. That never works. You get desperate, and desperate doesn't show up well. All right, I don't cold call anymore. You don't need to either if you have the processes in place to get into the conversations with the right people who can open up the doors for the business opportunities. Look, I've built a network in LinkedIn and YouTube and Quora and Facebook and Twitter and in real life of people who are highly relevant to me. And I've built processes that help me get into the right conversation so I don't need to cold call. Let me share with you a little bit of the processes that I use that help me overcome the need to cold call. Number 1, get an introduction. If you find someone that you want to talk with and you think they're the right person, look and find someone that you know who knows them. Find that person via LinkedIn or find them via Facebook or find them via whatever method you can find them. Find that influencer who can introduce you to that target audience, to that prospect, and ask them to introduce you. And this is one of the reasons why you want to develop really good relationships on your social media so that you can get those introductions to the target audience when you're trying to build your pipeline. Number 2, bump into the person you want to call on LinkedIn. Engage on their content. If you have a prospect that you want to have a conversation with and they're sharing content on LinkedIn, consume the content, which means review it or read it quickly, and then engage on it. If they're in a conversation with someone else, Jump into that same conversation where relevant and appropriate. Never hijack a conversation. You want to look for ways to engage with them before you reach out to them and have a conversation. Sometimes tagging them in a comment or tagging them in a relevant post could be beneficial. By the way, another way to bump into people is through real life networking. Now, the pandemic is causing us a little bit of strife in that regards, but hopefully as we recover from this, we'll be able to do it more. Show up and be publicly present in the place where your target audiences are, and you're more likely to bump into them in real life, possibly get a conversation. Tip number 3, bump into them on other social media. So you bumped into them on LinkedIn, or maybe you can, maybe you can't, but go and see if you can find some public content on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, or their podcasts, their blogs, their Reddit posts, their Quora posts, their Medium posts, etc., etc., etc. If you can find them somewhere else on social media or some other platform where they are sharing and engaging in meaningful ways relevant to you in some way or another, then engage on them. When people see that you are relevant to them beyond just business, it makes that initial call way easier. Number 4, adopt these ideas. Regardless of whether or not I'm cold calling or I'm calling someone who knows me, I strive to do these 3 things to encourage them to get into conversations with me. Number 1, be willing to do something to help them, even if it doesn't, directly turn into business for me. Call it whatever you want to do it, but when you help someone else, they're more likely to want to help you, and that help may just be simply getting into a conversation with you. Number 2, remember they're humans with responsibilities and challenges. And so we are not a priority to them at this point until they have a real need for us. We got to understand that. We got to stay aware and create bond and rapport and create relationships so that when they're ready, they'll reach out to us first. But that you don't know when that's going to be. So, and don't always call them just to pitch something. Be willing to call them just to say, how are you doing? If you're paying attention to them on other social media and know what's going on in their life, so just wish them the best without ever asking for anything. This is all about humans engaging with other humans. Number 3, and don't become a bother. I had a sales leader that told me every week, call him again, call him again, call him again. I'll never forget, and I met that guy years later, and I told him the story, and he goes, dude, I never heard your phone calls. I never looked at my voicemail messages on my phone. Don't become a bother. I prefer to limit my calls to once a quarter. Once a quarter, and especially once I've created some rapport with them. And then I can go focus on other accounts, focus on other opportunities. The bigger your pipeline is with opportunities, the less you have to be beating on one door. So build a bigger, broader pipeline and you'll have greater opportunities. These are just a few cold calling tips and ways to get past cold calling. There's lots of other ideas out there. Again, there's a phenomenal amount of content that you can use about cold calling, bonding and rapport, relationship building, nurturing the relationships. You'll find that the more purposeful you are at building your networks and asking for introductions, the easier it gets and the less cold calling you'll have to do. I'm Teddy. I run a company called Burris Consulting. Every day, I'm looking for a new conversation. I used to cold call like a madman. Today, I work on asking for introductions and helping others. Hope these ideas are helpful for you. I wish you all the best in your journey.